It's a great pleasure for us, especially for me, to include Rita Dove, Commonwealth Professor of English at the University of Virginia, in this series of readings sponsored by the Department of African American Studies. Rita Dove came to wide public attention when her third book, Thomas and Beulah, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1987. But this signal reward had been preceded by what Emerson, speaking of Whitman, called a long foreground. Just as a great deal of reading and writing on Whitman's part preceded the publication of Leaves of Grass, so we can track in Dove's case many evidences of the long foreground that preceded her winning the Pulitzer Prize. Rita Dove was born in 1952 in Akron, Ohio, and graduated summa cum laude from Miami University, where she studied, among other things, German, because her chemist father had books in German on his shelves, and she was determined to crack the code, the only reading code she didn't know at the time. She won a Fulbright Award to study at the University of Tübingen, and after that year of study went on to take an MFA in creative writing at the Writers' Workshop of the University of Iowa. Two early books of poems followed: The Yellow House on the Corner in 1980, and Museum, a very beautiful book, in 1983, the year in which she received, for that amount of work, a Guggenheim Fellowship. Then she embarked on Thomas and Beulah, a remarkable double sequence. One part of it concerning Thomas and his life, the other part concerning Beulah and her life. But they're married to each other, but they never meet across the sequences. These poems are lightly fictionalized accounts of the poet's grandparents, and we see their separate versions of their joint life. It's one of the great marriage poems. Thomas and Beulah contain many of the strengths that have won Rita Dove her large audience. She's an expert constructor of vignettes, sharp-edged pictures of a predicament, always tense, sometimes tragic. She has an acute sense of historical context as it impinges upon the private life. She sees life in terms of conflict and drama, which makes her poems very exciting. And she has a wonderful supply of verbs and adjectives that give her lines dancing action and audacious description. Like many other readers, I walked into the lives of Thomas and Beulah and have never forgotten them. Since that riveting book, Dove has taken on many other themes, some familial, some historical. I think especially of her 1995 collection called Mother Love, which explores in intimate detail, through an updating of Demeter's loss of Persephone to Hades, relations between mothers and daughters, daughters and mothers. It should be added that she and Fred Vebon, her husband, are parents of a daughter, so Mother Love is a known quantity here. Most recently, in On the Bus with Rosa Parks, Rita Dove has written poems about the life of her father, imagining herself into his youthful experience, and also poems about Rosa Parks and others preceding her, who, by refusing to sit in the back of the bus, put themselves in danger in this most ordinary of daily actions. Dove's intensity is as visible in her investigation of poetic means as in the fraught topics, adolescence, marriage, slavery, genocide, that she has taken on. Her quasi-sestina, Parsley, concerning a massacre of black cane workers in the Dominican Republic is widely anthologized. And like the challenge of the sestina, another challenge appears in Mother Love, where she wrote in a 17th century form a group of sonnets in the form of a circle or corona, in which the last line of Sonnet 1 becomes the first line of Sonnet 2, and so on through the sequence. She thrives on technical challenge and tailors her poems in spiky and offbeat ways, which gives them that volatility on the page that makes us want to read them and reread them. Dove has risked a book of stories, a novel, and a play, in addition to her more central work in the lyric, just as she has risked learning the viola da gamba and studying the lieder literature, and I think studying the tango, if I'm to believe correctly. Dove's long foreground and all the books that follow that preparation made her a natural candidate for the post of Poet Laureate of the United States, a post she held, which has sometimes been held in a very passive way, but a post she held with notable activist engagement from 1993 to 1995. She was the youngest American and the youngest person and the first African American to hold the title of Poet Laureate. Dove has been awarded the NAACP Great American Artist Award and the National Humanities Medal. On behalf of all her enthusiastic readers here, I'm very happy to welcome Rita Dove.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me in the back? Is it fine back there? Just do something if you can't. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see all of you on this rainy day, and I'm glad it's raining instead of snowing. I'd like to read mostly new poems today, but I'll warm up with a few poems from On the Bus with Rosa Parks, and specifically from the sequence, the title sequence. As Helen mentioned, and I want to thank her for that wonderful introduction, I feel every time I hear or read Helen writing about poetry, I feel I don't deserve the field, and then that makes me write a little harder. But as Helen mentioned, there were women before Rosa Parks who in fact had been arrested for not sitting in the blacks-only section of the buses in Montgomery. Two, in fact, in the very year that, 1955, in the very year that Rosa Parks became the test case for the segregation laws. And I'd like to read you a poem about one of those women. Her name was Claudette Colvin. She was found again a few years ago as working in an rest home in New York City. And she basically was the rules were very complicated because you could sit in the front of the bus until that part filled up. And once that part filled up, then the blacks would move to the back of the bus. So she was sitting in the front of the bus, and it filled up with some high school students. And when they demanded that she go to the back, she just didn't do it. This poem is called Claudette Colvin Goes to Work. It takes place in the present. And there is an epigraph from the boycott flyer that was passed around in 1955 after Rosa Parks was arrested, which goes, "Another Negro woman has been arrested and thrown into jail because she refused to get up out of her seat on the bus and give it to a white person. This is the second time since the Claudette Colvin case. This must be stopped." Claudette Colvin Goes to Work. Menial twilight sweeps the storefronts along Lexington as the shadows arrive to take their places among the scourge of the earth. Here and there a fickle brilliance, light bulbs coming on in each narrow residence, the golden wattage of bleak interiors announcing, "Anyone home?" or "I'm beat, bring me a beer." Mostly I say to myself, still here. Lay my keys on the table, pack the perishables away before flipping the switch. I like the sugary look of things in bad light. One drop of sweat is all it would take to dissolve an armchair pillow into brocade residue. Sometimes I wait until it's dark enough for my body to disappear. Then I know it's time to start out for work. Along the avenue, the cabs start up, heading toward Midtown. Neon stutters into ecstasy as the male integers light up their smokes and let loose a stream of brave talk. "Hey, mama," souring quickly to "your mama" when there's no answer. As if the most injury they can do is insult the reason you're here at all, walking in your whites down to the stop so you can make a living. So ugly, so fat, so dumb, so greasy, what do we have to do to make God love us? Mama was a maid. My daddy mowed lawns like a boy, and I'm the crazy girl off the bus, the one who wrote in class she was going to be president. I take the number 6 bus to the Lexington Avenue train, and then I'm there all night, adjusting the sheets, emptying the pans. And I don't curse or spit or kick and scratch like they say I did then. I help those who can't help themselves. I do what needs to be done. and I sleep whenever sleep comes down on me. They were trying very hard in Montgomery, Alabama of 1955 to find someone who was impeccable when they were brought up before the courts. And for that reason, they rejected several women who were arrested earlier. And in fact, I think many of you know that when Rosa Parks was taken to the courtroom for the case, and there was a huge crowd outside, a woman cried out in the crowd, "Oh, she's so sweet, they're in trouble now." So. Another woman who was taken off the bus was a young girl by the name of Mary Smith, who said, when asked years later how she felt about not being Rosa Parks, she said, "I'm just a girl who people were mean to on a bus. I could have been anybody." The enactment. Can't use no teenager, especially no poor black trash, no matter what her parents do to keep up a living. Can't use anyone without sense enough to bite their tongue. It's got to be a woman, someone of standing, preferably shy, preferably married. And she's got to know when the moment's right. Stay polite, though her shoulder's aching, bus driver, the same one threw her off 12 years before. Then all she's got to do is sit there, quiet, till the next moment finds her. And only then can she open her mouth to ask, "Why do you push us around?" And his answer, "I don't know, but the law is the law, and you are under arrest." She must sit there and not smile as they enter to carry her off. She must know who to call, who will know whom else to call to bail her out. And only then can she stand up and exhale. Can she walk out the cell and down the jail steps into flashbulbs and her employer's white arms, and go home and sit down in the seat we have prepared for her. I'll read one more here and then I'll go on to new poems. My husband and I have a confession. We love to take cruise ships, and not the Caribbean kind of get drunk as fast as you can cruise ships, but the ones where you really field travel. And as a consequence, we've gone several times on the QE2. I can't swim, and you'd think that I wouldn't want to do that, but I can't fly either, and I take planes. So here's this one. The third or fourth, it's about a 5 to 6 day trip. And I love the third or fourth day when you can see no land. QE2, transatlantic crossing, third day. Panel of gray silk, liquefied ashes. Dingy percale tugged over the vast, dim earth, ill-fitting, softened by eons of tossing and turning, unfurling its excesses, recalling its losses, no seam for the mending, no salvage to catch and align from where I sit and look out from this rose-colored armchair along the gallery. I can hear the chime of the elevator, the hush of trod carpet. Beyond the alcove, escorted widows perfect a slow rumba. Couples linger by the cocktail piano, enmeshed in their own delight, as others stroll past, pause to remark on the weather. Mist, calm seas. This is a journey for those who simply wish to be on the way, to lie back and be rocked for a while, dangled between the silver spoon and the golden gate. Even I'm thrilled, who never learned to wait on a corner hunched in bad weather, or how many coins to send clicking into the glass bowl. I can only imagine what it's like to climb the steel stairs and sit down, to feel the weight of yourself sink into the moment of going home. This is not the exalted fluorescence of the midnight route, exhaustion sweetening the stops. There's no money here, just chips and signatures, no neat dime or tarnished token, no exact change. Here I float on the lap of existence. Each night I put this body into its sleeve of dark water with no more than a teardrop of ecstasy, a thimbleful of ache. And that, friends, is the difference. I can't erase an ache I never had. Not even my own grandmother would pity me. Instead, she'd suck her teeth at the sorry sight of some Negro actually looking for misery. Well, I'd go home if I knew where to get off. I have several long-term projects that I'm forever tinkering on, and one of them is a group of poems about the artist Dürer, Albrecht Dürer, who was really a man caught between ages. He was caught between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. And though he did go to Italy, he went from his hometown of Nuremberg to Italy and discovered color, really vibrant color and perspective. He was forever looking for that thing that he knew was right around the corner. As a consequence, he was also really fascinated with science and with everything around him. So he took many kind of sightseeing trips where he collected things. His wife got quite angry at him because we would bring home useless things like rocks and turtle shells. This poem takes place in this whole Dürer sequence at the turn of the century, when, like every turn of the century, and this is a turn into the 16th, people imagined that the world had come to an end. And there were the usual sightings of UFOs and things like that. It's called Weltschmerz, which is German for, well, there is no, it's the ache of the world. And there's an epitaph from Dürer's painter's manual. He wrote a manual for painters trying to explain how to paint, and he says in it, I may in my imagination throw a point high up in the air or drop it into the depths where I cannot reach it with my body. But in order to make it plausible, I must draw it with a pen and write the word point next to it so that the point will mean point. This man in the Middle Ages, I mean, it's amazing. Weltschmerz. He who referred to his wife as my good Agnes, and always in connection with the maid, simple girl who cried out in the midst of a miracle, crosses dropped from the sky onto the clean white shirts of her master. What could he say to a creature so devoid of irony she couldn't even laugh when he yelled, "Come out of the rain"? Still, the centuries fresh. 3 days' journey to view a beached whale, and by the time he arrives, the whale has been swept to sea again. He stays a while anyway, collects rocks, sketches a negress so plump and shy she can't lift her eyes from the tops of his hobnailed boots. Morosity, he writes later, is the penalty for too much thought without exercise. So he digs Dame Sorrow out of metal, carves her slouched among orbs and compasses, swathed in grim drapery, and yet it is his own jaw etched in fury. His gaze he finds burning beneath those extravagant curls. What goes up must come down. The maid saw that with her own silly eyes. Throw up your hands, put it down on paper in ink. What can one say to a woman who refuses to pose nude even for a famous artist? Gather up your stones, your crab carapaces, your smudged equations for human perfection, and remember a green brooch for the melancholy Agnes. Another sequence I've been working on involves soldiers, black soldiers from World War I, and we just toured the African American department and saw the wonderful poster recruiting for World War I for black soldiers. It says soldiers, blacks are no slackers. Colored soldiers are no slackers, it said. The soldiers, many of the black soldiers were actually went and fought under French command because Segregation still existed, of course, in the United States Army, and though they were trained, they weren't being sent overseas, and so the French said, well, if you don't want them, we'll take them. This is a series of poems. Each one of them begins with the place of battle as a title, the place of battle, the division, and the first name of the soldier. La Chapelle, 92nd Division, Ted. This lonely, beautiful word means church, and it is quiet here. The stone walls curve like slow water. When we arrived, the people were already gone, green shutters latched and stoops swept clean. A cow lowed through the village, pushing into our gloves her huge, sodden jaw. It's Sunday, and I'm standing on the bitter ridge of France, overlooking the war. La guerre is asleep. This morning early on patrol, we slipped down through the mist and scent of burning wood chips. Somewhere someone was warm. Into Moyi-Motier, cloister of flushed brick, and a little river braiding its dark hair. Back in Louisiana, the earth is red, but it suckles you until you can sing yourself groan. Here, even the wind has edges. Drizzle splintered around us. We stood on the arched bridge and thought for a moment of the dead we had left behind in the valley in the terrible noise. But I'm not sad. On the way back through the twigs, I glimpsed in a broken window box by the roadside mums, stunned lavenders and pinks dusted with soot. I am a little like them, heavy-headed, rough curls open to the rain. And it seems like we're headed back that way again. I'm not going to get started on that right now. My husband and I have taken up, it is true, Helen, ballroom dancing. A few years ago, our house burned down, and what happened as we were going through the wreckage and the dust, and it's incredible what you can find in ashes, because we actually did find manuscripts, some manuscripts and things, and everything you find is a pleasure, everything is a joy, and that's something I never thought about, that in the face of tragedy, you don't think about, well, you do think about the loss, but when you find something, it's such an incredible joy that it pulls you out of it again. But then we took up dancing. Some friends of ours, our neighbors, said, stop, you've got to stop, go buy yourself a dress and do something. So we went to a dance, and we saw people doing the waltz and the foxtrot. We said, we want to do that. And so this is one of the things we've been doing lately. I'll read you a poem called Foxtrot Fridays. Thank the stars there's a day each week to tuck in the grief, lift your pearls, and stride, brush, stride, quick, quick, with a heel, ball toe. Smooth as Nat King Cole's slow satin smile, easy as taking one day at a time, one man and one woman, rib to rib, with no heartbreak in sight. Just the sweep of paradise and the space of a song to count all the wonders in it. A few paradise poems then followed, which I didn't really figure out why I was writing them until later, but quote for a title, I Have Been a Stranger in a Strange Land, with another quote from Emily Dickinson, life's spell is so exquisite, something conspires to break it. Everything conspires to break it. I have been a stranger in a strange land. It wasn't bliss. What was bliss but the ordinary life? She'd spend hours in patter, moving through whole days, touching, sniffing, tasting, exquisite housekeeping in a charmed world. And yet there was always more of the same, all that happiness, the aimless being there. So she wandered for a while, bush to arbor, lingered to look through a pond's restive mirror. He was off, cataloging the universe, probably, pretending he could organize what was clearly someone else's chaos. That's when she found the tree, the dark crabbed branches bearing up such speechless bounty. She knew without being told this was forbidden. It wasn't a question of ownership. Who could lay claim to such maddening perfection? And there was no voice in her head, no whispered intelligence lurking in the leaves. Just an ache that grew until she knew she'd already lost everything except desire, the red heft of it warming her outstretched palm. I've done a group of poems based on that sentence from the typewriter. You learn when you're trying to learn how to touch type. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. I'll read you Quick and Brown and Fox. Quick. Look, a baby one. Wink of fuzz in the headlights, and gray at that. Now he peers from the culvert, all bobble and twitch, vacant eyes. He's been through this bait and switch all night. Where's Mother? On the hill there, crested in moonshine, the fabled silhouette, sleek curve plumpening into a tail, waving its flamboyant afterthought. She disappears, red swish or gray, too quick to tell. Oh, to be gone like that, no grief nor thought of love, pure purpose poured into flight. At these dance showcases, and we've done a couple of those, dancing, they often have women come and sell their wares, and it's typically all of this ballroom dance stuff, which is so wonderfully tawdry and gaudy. And as one of my friends said, you can dress up like a whore at the age of 50 and nobody cares. And they bring these dress ladies in, and they have those incredible gowns that cost, you don't want to know. Brown. Why, you look good in every color, the dress lady gurgled just before I stepped onto the parquet for a waltz. I demurred. We were in a country club, after all, and she, fresh from Fort Lauderdale, do people actually live there? With 5 duffel bags worth of ball gowns, enough tulle and fringe and pearls to float a small cotillion, was only trying to earn a living. For once, I was not the only black person in the room. 2 others, both male. I thought of Sambo. I thought a few other things, too, unmentionable here. Don't get me wrong. I've always loved my skin, the way it glows against citron and fuchsia, those difficult hues. But the difference I cause whenever I walk into a polite space is why I prefer grand entrances, especially with a waltz, that European constipated swoon. The dress in question was red. Fox. She knew what she was, and so was capable of anything anyone could imagine. She loved what she was, there for the taking. Imagine. She imagined nothing. She loved nothing more than what she had, which was enough for her, which was more than any man could handle. I'll read 3 more. I'm debating whether we should stay in the dance mode and move out for one poem or not. I'll keep us there. Borderline Mambo. As if the lid stayed put on the marmalade. As if you could get the last sip of champagne out of the bottom of the fluted glass. As if we weren't all dying, as if we all weren't going to die sometime, as if we knew for certain when or how. as if the baseball scores made sense to the toddler, as if the dance step mattered, or there's a point where they don't. For instance, wheelchair, heart flutter, oxygen bottle mounted on the septuagenarian's back at the state ballroom competitions. That's Manny, still pumping the mambo with his delicious slip of an instructor. Hip, hip, hooray. Mambo, for instance, if done right, gives you a chance to rest. 1 beat in 4. 1 chance in 4, 1 chance in 10, 100, as if we could understand what that means. Hooray. Keep pumping, as if you could keep the lid on a secret once the symptoms start to make sense. A second instance, a respite, a third, always that hope. If we could just scrape that last little bit out, if only it wouldn't bottom out before they can decode the message sent to the cells. Of course it matters when, even though, because we live in mystery. For instance, beauty, love, honor, as if we didn't like secrets. Point where it hurts. Of course we'll tell. This poem, this next one has several speakers in it, different parts, which you'll figure out as I read it. Salome really didn't want the head of John the Baptist. Her mother wanted the head of John the Baptist. She danced, and then she asked her mother, "What should I ask for?" And her mother, Herodias, who had been rejected by John the Baptist a few days before, said, "His head." The 7 Veils of Salome. Salome awaits her entrance. I was standing in the doorway when he reproached her, not with words, but a simple absence of attention. She was smiling, holding out a slip of meat, skewered fruit, some delicacy he'd surely never seen in all his dust-blown, flea-plagued wanderings, and he stared at it for the longest while, as if the offer came from it and not those tapered fingers, my mother's famous smile. He said nothing, merely turned away his large and beautifully arrogant head. Herodias in the doorway. More than anything, I ache to see her so girlish. She steps languidly into their midst, as if onto a pooled expanse of grass, or as if she were herself the meadow, unruffled green, ringed with lilies instead of these red-rimmed eyes, this wasteland soaked in smoke and pleasure. Ignorant, she moves as if inventing time, and the musicians scurry to deliver a carpet of flutes under her flawless heel. Herod, watching. I should have avoided this, loving her mother as I do, to the length and breadth of my kingdom, even to the chilly depths of history's wrath. But it was my birthday. I was bent upon happiness and love. I loved Herodias, my Herodias, who sends her honeyed daughter into the feast. The first veil fell, and all my celebrated years dissolved in bitter rapture. O Herodias, you have outdone us all. The fool at Herod's feet. Just a girl, slim-hipped, 2 knots for breasts, sheathed potential caught before the inevitable overbloom and rot. Life's revenge if death eludes us. All any of us men want, really. Just a girl. Otherwise, who can fathom it? How is it to be fathomed? At his behest? Her mother's? It matters little. She was dispatched into the circle of elders, and there she rivets the world's desire. Salome dancing. I have a head on my shoulders, but no one sees it. No one reckons with a calculated wrist or pouting underlip. I've navigated this court's attentions, and I will prove I can be crueler than government. I will delegate what nature's given me, this body, this anguish, oiled curves and perfumed apertures. I will dance until they've all lost their heads, the nobles slobbering over their golden goblets, the old king sweating on his throne, my mother in the doorway rigid with regret, the jester who watches us all and laughs. Oh, mother, what else is a girl to do? And I'd like to end with a poem. It's called American Smooth. There are many categories in ballroom dancing, and this is the one I just like the title of it so much. This includes the waltzes and the foxtrots, but it distinguishes itself from the international waltz. American Smooth. We were dancing. It must have been a foxtrot or a waltz, something romantic but requiring restraint, rise and fall, precise execution as we moved into the next song without stopping, two chests heaving above a 7-league stride. Such perfect agony one learns to smile through, ecstatic mimicry being the sine qua non of American Smooth. And because I was distracted by the effort of keeping my frame, the leftward lean, head turned just enough to gaze out past your ear and always smiling, smiling, I didn't notice how still you'd become until we had done it. For 2 measures, 4, achieved flight, that swift and serene magnificence, before the earth remembered who we were and brought us down. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rita. Rita Dove. That was fantastic. And now, to introduce our second guest this evening, John Wideman, is also my colleague from the English department, Peter M. Sachs, who is the John P. Marquand Professor of English. Let's welcome Peter Sachs.
Hard not to remain for a moment in the silence that true poetry creates and to hear the echoes. Pure purpose poured into flight, crueler than government, memorable, all. Thank you. And it's out of silence that I wish to introduce John Edgar Wideman, whose work is so much about moving out of silence into unimaginable, eloquent utterance. John Edgar Wideman's brilliant and searing Homeward trilogy begins with the voice of a dead man speaking about the unspeakable. He's called Brother. Like many of Wideman's protagonists, Brother has had one of those terrifying, terminal, but also initiatory nightmares. He admits it was, quote, a cripple-ass, no-kind-of-sense dream. I ain't told nobody never. He was on a train, pitch-black night, inside and out, everyone scared, out of control, slamming, rolling around the floor of a boxcar. Quote, funny thing was, I knew just why they had to scream. Couldn't put in words then and can't now. Ain't no words for it, but I knew why. See, 'cause I wanted to scream. I wanted to cut loose and tell somebody how scared I was, what an evil place I was in. I knew if I'd have screamed, I'd be gone. The scream would take me with it, my insides and my outsides too. So I didn't scream, couldn't scream. The genius and the achievement of John Edgar Wideman is in the alchemical, almost shamanistic blend of courage and skill with which he risks crossing over from the scared silence through or past the yet more scary province of scream into utterance itself. He gives himself over to being gone into the pouring current or flame of an intimate and yet always more than personal vision. Insides and outsides taken into the furious beauty of what he makes as he transforms what is otherwise unrepresentable into eloquent art. Without sacrificing an ounce of terror, he brings courage and imagination to bear. Without short-circuiting an inch of outrage, he reveals and arrives at states of being that are more difficult and more noble than anger alone. In his many, many prize-winning books of fiction and autobiography, part memorial testimony, part Jeremiad lamentation prophecy, wholly trial by ordeal, his language, for all its freight, has an exhilarating pace and suppleness, a buoyant, rebounding flow, both on the rhythmic and the figural levels. A bounding, rebounding flow. And of course, alongside his PEN/Faulkner Awards or his MacArthur Grant, there is his place in the Big Five Basketball Hall of Fame. By no coincidence is this writer someone who knows viscerally how a ball, a few mouthfuls of air, moves around the horizontal and vertical axes of a confined space. The court, the page, the mind, the prison or enclosure of an unjust society. How it can convert its confines into a place of improvisational communion, where confinement may become a drive towards delivery. From the streets of Homewood, Pittsburgh, to the pyramids of Mesoamerica, or the conjured lands of the Xhosa people in 18th century South Africa, from the ghastly boxcar floor of nightmare to the actual inside walls of Western Penitentiary, from origins of many traditions to endings and somehow beyond, his work makes up one of the most truthful and fortifying pilgrimages of our time. And as the street becomes the spirit road, Wideman's incantatory pages bring to enduring light the members of his and our single, full-blooded family. A family never more threatened. Sometimes we get what we need. Please join me in welcoming John Edgar Wideman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rita, I'm going to read some poetry, and you'll realize you need poets like me, because show people how good you are. Some of us have to be out there just messing around, but I won't critique my own work. Thank you very much for the introduction. I guess I'm still doing the same kinds of things as I think about what I've chosen to read, and I didn't choose to read anything until about 5 minutes ago. These are difficult times, and there is a place for poetry. There is a place for fiction. And so many of you probably have come out here today for that. And each of us has our own private space where we deal with the worrisome urge of our country to either rule or destroy a good portion of the earth. These are bad times. It's a day, I believe, all over the world where students are making a stand against that madness. And so my tendency was, or my desire was, to write something about that and talk about it today. And I did, and I finished it. And then I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Just in the same sense that I go play basketball sometimes, in the worst of times, best of times, I'm going to read you a story. But not only read you a story. Harvard, you're not the only one who makes invitations to me. I was invited to Def Jam Poetry Rock. I don't know how, but I've heard that Most Def is a fan, and anyway, I was invited to go there this past Monday and read a poem. And so I thought it'd be great fun to sit in a nightclub and watch the other spoken word people, and maybe get on TV and call my mother and tell her, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to be rapping." Hey. 6 decades plus is not a bad time to start a new career. What the heck? And I hear there's money in it, more than... But it took me back. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was afraid I'd have to memorize something. That was intimidating enough. But I went back to, just by coincidence, I went back to Philadelphia Fire, which is a book that's at least 12, 14 years old now. Some of it's 15 years old, given the time I was writing it. And I knew there were some raps located somewhere in Philadelphia Fire, and I figured those might be fun to read. So I went back to them. And it was one of those hazard objectif, weird kinds of correspondences. Because I didn't really remember the poems. I knew what I intended, I knew where they fit, but I hadn't remembered them word by word. And I'll read them to you. And I won't make the connections anymore. Then I'll let you hear the connections. But if you recall, in 1985, Mayor Wilson Goode was very upset because there were a group of MOVE people who were occupying a house in West Philadelphia. And for at least almost 10 years, there had been feuding back and forth between these MOVE people whose largest crime was being different. They wore dreadlocks, let their kids run around naked, they didn't kill things. A strange kind of Rousseauian group in the middle, an anti-city group living in the middle of a big eastern urban environment. Lots of contradictions, but essentially these folks got under the mayor's skin. He wanted to turn Philadelphia into a black run Camelot beside the Schuylkill. And here were all these colored folks who were acting like goddamn fools out there in West Philadelphia and embarrassing him in the newspapers, etc., etc. So on his own, after trying to work through the courts and trying to get the courts' support, Mayor Goode decided to bomb the MOVE house. And you probably know the rest of the story. 11 MOVE people, mainly women and children, were killed. Hundreds of Philadelphians were displaced, and the whole neighborhood was razed to the ground by the second bombing of its own citizens by United States government in history, the first one being Oklahoma in 1921. Well, anyway, these are two raps that came out of my contemplation of that situation. This is your Rap City Rapper on the dial, so just cool out and listen a while, because if you don't dig what I'm rapping about, they'll pull your skin off, turn you inside out. They'll pull your skin off, turn you inside out. It's a new trickeration, a hip sensation, divine inspiration blowing across the nation. They peel your skin and you're in like Flynn. Drain your brain so there ain't no pain. Makes you feel so real. It's a hell of a deal. No money down, easy credit, skin's gone. You can just forget it. Dippy-doo, rip-a-dip, rippy-dip, rippy-dip, do. Put their hands in your heart and rip it all apart. Keep on peeling for a righteous feeling. You got to die one day. Might as well go this way. You're a separate nation under their domination. Takes you for a ride. Peel away your pride. When your skin's gone chillin', are you black inside? Hey y'all, this Rap City here got to tell a tale, make you shed a tear. about some dreadlock bloods trying to do their thing, and an evil empire with an evil king. Not the kind of story I like to tell. Dreads was seeking heaven, all they caught was hell. Didn't eat no meat, let their kids run naked, got the emperor uptight. He just couldn't take it. Called his army, his navy, his flying corps, said, "This shit's gone too far. I can't stand it no more. Got to play by my rules if you live in my city. Fuck with the piper, don't expect no pity. Shame if babies have to burn, but life is hard. They got to learn. Give them primitives 5 minutes to leave the premises. If they don't comply, come down like nemesis. When the smoke clears, don't want nary a one left standing to tell me how my city should be run. Left standing to tell me how my city should be run. How can I rule with equanimity when every day them monkeys making a monkey out of me? You wouldn't believe the ordinance brought to bear to drive them rastas out their lair. Dreads didn't falter, they fought toe-to-toe, but the odds were too heavy. They had to go. It was like Mike Tyson throwing on a little kid. The kid was doomed, whatever he did. Down they went in bullets, water and flame. It was murder one by any name, murder one by any name. Splibby, 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 doo-dah. I'm the rapper, the dapper, the last backslapper. With you on my team, we the cream to cream. Don't cry, don't moan, don't pine away. Them dreadies be back another day. Remember what you heard Rhapsody say. Them dreads coming back. Somebody's got to pay. Dreads coming back. Somebody's got to pay. Got to pay. Got to pay. Somebody's got to pay. Now, I'm a good American, and this is a story about an American. And it's dedicated to all you mothers out there, no matter your age or your gender, all the mothers out there. I want to ask my mother what she saw all the days. She sat 6 floors up on her balcony these last years of her long life, watching people passing below in the streets she walked as a little girl. Streets once wide and boundless as the universe. Saturday afternoons with her mother, Frida, by the hand, their reflections gliding across the window of the A&P, headed up Homewood Avenue, headed for Frankstown Avenue. People to smile back at who nodded or spoke or smiled at her mother or paused and spoke to the pair of them just as it had happened other Saturdays. A hand patting her olive oil shiny braids, her shoulder, perhaps Mrs. So-and-so's smothering perfume, then brisk, dry lips scratching her cheek, her little girl's name said by a person who stops them as if her name's just been invented. The 3 of them, her mother, herself, the one they meet in front of Mellon Bank or Colombo Brothers Hardware Store, or maybe the Belmar Show just before they cross Frankstown Avenue, beholding the name as if it's never been uttered before in this world, until the 3 of them discover it each Saturday afternoon, pleased again by the wonder of it, delighted she owns it, and they can say it, celebrate it when they meet on the street all the Saturdays to come. My mother could tell me about if I could ask her, and I want to ask her, except what she sees when she stands and peers over the steel wall enclosing her balcony is her failing body, mirrored in streets, failing as fast as she is. Faster, the unnatural, unthinkable, but true fact. She might very well outlive the Homewood streets, just as she outlived my nameless siblings, twins, a boy stillborn, a girl expiring after a few hours, and bear witness again to the last, dismal, worn-out signs of vitality ebbing away. Why would I want my mother to confirm what's plain as day for my own eyes to see? We both know the answer, don't we? Because she is the mother, I am the son, and the habit of turning to her, of seeking comfort in her arms, is too old to break. I am afraid for her. Her body's slow, painful, unraveling. How it can tyrannize her spirit. The streets, an obstinate, unforgiving reminder of how everything ends, and endings not pretty. Here is what I ask instead. For one more time, at the round oak table, against the wall of her apartment, farthest from the balcony door, drinking coffee together before most people out of bed, and the streets below quiet as milk. What we chat about won't matter. Too early for chatting anyway. I'd be content glancing about the room, committing its memories to memory, finding my sister and brothers, nieces and nephews, myself, relatives of my mother's generation and their fathers and mothers and aunts and uncles, the oldest scattered, lost, long gone in photos, artifacts arranged on the furniture in their particular places, holding distinctive attitudes and postures they'll hold, or rather maintain, only as long as we look and they look back, displaying to each other shared likenesses, the poses that fill the silent reaches of my mother's apartment with a family. I'm content to think quietly such a thought, and others unspeakable, and listen to my mother's spoon stir into her mug sweet powder sprinkled from a pink low-cal packet, and carnation, evaporated milk, poured from a red and white can, or her voice thinking aloud about what she's heard lately on TV, or read in the newspaper, or someone said on an all-night talk show, gathering help to get herself starting to talk, because she's shy about her own voice, her musings and fears and worries, her opinions. Even after being on the planet for 4/5 of a century, she still dismisses what she has to say as most likely insignificant. Yet no doubt about it, she also honors and guards fiercely the responsibility of her words, devotes herself to the necessity of voicing them artfully, convincingly, since they circle around and through the people she loves, and they, the words and people, are all she has. The big world beyond her 2 rooms, only rumors and a sad curiosity, invisible until it filters through the lives of her people, her words about them, the prism the world must pass through like light to be colored and viewed. On her good days, I imagine my mother dreaming the streets, and her dreams are what happens in the street below. The way she used to dream me home safely, by sitting up and waiting for me to stumble in, no matter how late the hour, back in those younger, fast days when I couldn't get enough of the street. Fuck it, I'd say, at some point during nights drinking and hanging out and hitting on the ladies. If she wants to stay awake till 3 a.m., that's her damned, stubborn, silly business. My business right here on this stool, taking care of whatever business I'm big and bad enough to get into, downing another shot of Seagram 7 and nip of Iron City, deeper and deeper into the music and noise and dark, understanding a little more why some nights my father never made it home till dawn, understanding why my mom warned me, steered me away from this sweet, sloppy shit for as long as she could, beginning as I wondered what shapes the darkness might trick or treat out of itself, beginning to forgive my father as if he cared or needed my forgiveness then when he was alive any more than he needs it now, dead and in his grave. Didn't he always declare he was a grown man and took his choices and paid his dues? Forgive him for leaving one day and never coming back home. My own anger and guilt and pride and selfishness and pleasure hopelessly entangled with his, with hers, with the pair of them, my mother and father stuck together, unstuck, year after year. Then one night, when just me, my mother, and my 4 siblings left, I stayed out in the street till no place to go but home, pushing the limit till it wasn't night and not even dawn when I arrived home from partying, not slipping in, not tiptoeing, not slinking and creeping around, but standing taller than my absent father and looking down at a smallish, exhausted woman curled in a chair who wouldn't raise her eyes to me, didn't comment on the stinking cloud of booze and cigarette smoke and nastiness I must have brought in the door with me, just sat in her nightgown with the housecoat wrapped around it, her bare feet in the chair's lap, squashed back bedroom slippers on linoleum, not bothering to ask, "Where have you been, boy?" Not a glance up, nor a challenge, shout, threat, or tears. I'd worn her out, but hadn't won. Hadn't proved a goddamn thing, really, only that I could be the person she was counting on me not to be. Disappointing her, as she'd hoped I wouldn't, prayed I couldn't, but she must have suspected all along the moment was coming. And in spite of anticipating the worst, she didn't change, couldn't lose, since she'd never held back, never stinted, never regretted lavishing her love on me, so she couldn't lose. But I betrayed my love for her. If not betrayed, compromised it at the very least, towering over her in a small bare room on Copeland Street where my fatherless family had landed, me standing there in the middle of the floor, arms crossed over my chest, daring to call myself a man because she'd loved me enough to set herself up for just this disappointing moment, this willful, phony little triumph of mine, because I took it upon myself to teach my mother a lesson. She'd sit up and wait and dream me home safely, and sooner or later I'd arrive in spite of myself, ungrateful, hating the visible wear and tear she'd endured, denying herself a decent night's sleep. At my core, a hollowness or anger, where my heart should have helped me understand what I couldn't yet, and probably not to this day, understand, except to regret the hollowness more, and wish that I could, guided by her example, but in my own fashion, give to others as she gave to me. Layer after layer of giving, like yarn, forming a ball around the vacancy at its center. Her giving allowing me to grow, to stretch, binding me tighter and stronger with strings she could spin from some inexhaustible source within herself, helping me hold together around the empty needle's eye she could not penetrate, and I can't either. The image is awkward as I am, finding words for my feelings and lack of feeling, let alone words for my mother's emotions. The image of myself as a neatly wound ball of yarn with a hole at its center, and my mom as a sort of magic spider implodes. The pinpoint hollowness inside swallows everything around it, and I understand the reversal, the wipeout must have hidden inside the words from the instant they were conceived. Maybe even the reason the image was born, hungry for its turn to collapse, to take back words, shut them up, sweep them down the black hole where everything returns and emerges and returns for no reason, in no particular order. Mother to son, son to father, mother to father to son. Unscheduled exchanges, not a circle completing itself, always loose ends, loose, raggedy, orphaned threads, bloody signs left behind at each old site of attachment and separation. I know my mother didn't speak to me on the morning I was trying to prove a point by staying out late, but did prove a point, but not the one I believed I was making. And no, thank goodness, she must have started talking to me again, because here we are this morning, chattering now. Maybe she didn't speak to me that whole first day, or fragment of day, but sooner or later she picked up where we'd left off before I walked out the door one night and didn't return till long past the hour I desired to return. The hour I could reasonably assume weariness would push her into a numbed drowsiness that would serve as sleep, even if she continued to worry and will herself awake. Staying out past that hour, I knew I'd be doling out a dose of pain to my mother, pushing her to the point of pain, and then farther, going about my partying with no remorse, perhaps extra satisfaction, as if she deserved discomfort, earned it by being susceptible to it, earned it by being stubborn and unreasonable, keeping up a habit begun when I was in my early teens of waiting till I arrived home before she goes to sleep. Pain, I told myself, that hurt me as much or more than her, which was partly true and also a perversely gratifying refrain, since I borrowed it from her. Words, if not spoken aloud, implied during the rare physical punishments she inflicted on me when I was little. Pain I wouldn't have been able to bear otherwise. Hurting her one night and morning to learn how not to let her hurt me. Disciplining her to undo hurt she inflicted upon herself. Hurting her so she doesn't hurt herself unnecessarily, because I was okay, damn it, fine, grown, didn't need her hurt dogging me, hurting me while I was out trying to have fun. It's all pretty raw still, I guess. What was unfolding that morning hurt us both, no doubt. Hurts this instant as I recite the evil word, hurt, over and over, the word changing in quality, quantity, significance, shrinking into itself, exploding boundaries, rising in degree of difficulty with each repetition, each performance. If she sits on the plastic lawn chair, pulled up beside a matching table, topped by its ghetto of crowded, scraggly potted plants, the chair stationed outside the balcony's sliding glass door, the chair we can see through the door's pale, nearly transparent curtain when we're drinking coffee at the round oak table. If she's in that chair, my mother spends most of her time leaning down and peeking through an opening that runs between balcony railing and a chest-high barrier bolted to the concrete floor. Since the barrier is a solid sheet of metal and the steel tubing rail fastened above it, too high to see over when she's settled on the Kmart stacking chair, it's either stand up and look over the railing or bend down to the slot if she wants to check out the street. From the chair, if you push it back a bit from the barrier, or from inside the apartment, if you draw back the glass door's curtain, you can view a line of steep hills opposite the senior citizens' low-rise. Hills clustered and climbing each other, crowded with houses and housing projects and apartment buildings. Waves of hills receding finally to form the dark horizon where Homewood Brushton's highest houses and trees meet the sky. Enough big trees remain to turn the helter-skelter hillsides green in spring and summer, transform them to a motley tapestry of golds and reds in fall. Dropping off precipitously from the hills and stretching to the left, enormous swatches of Pittsburgh spread out, punctuated by thrusting landmarks whose names I know, and spires and towers I've seen all my life, but couldn't name if you paid me. On clear days, a bluish haze to the west, towards Oakland and downtown, the three rivers, Allegheny, Ohio, Monongahela, converging at the Golden Triangle, Frankstown Avenue's steep rise in the opposite direction, levels at East Hills, some of Homewood Brushton's best houses folded into the steepness before the edge of the suburbs, a panorama of city over which planes, too far away to hear, sail regularly, so it must be a favorite flight path to the greater Pittsburgh airport in Carnegie. From her chair outside on the balcony on the top floor of what I've been told is the tallest residential building in Homewood, my mother can daydream at the sky, gaze at the backdrop of hills in the middle distance, but she cannot tend to the business in the streets below unless she stands or bows her head like someone peering into a microscope or praying and peeks through the slot running the length of the guard wall some kind architect devised so old birds like her don't tumble from the nest. I feel myself in her body, the congenital aches we share, hunched over, blessedly unaware of straining muscles in the lower back, muscles and ligaments and nerves, forgotten until she straightens up and they spasm and scream. But nothing hurts at first, just a little stiffness as she leans down to peer through the slot, concentrating on the boy who hops down from the last step of the yellow school bus. Same stop, same time, same hop, 5 days a week. A boy about the age Brian, Tamika's oldest son, was last year. She must cross him, that brown, bouncy, in a hurry boy, at the red light when he listens to her. But most days he darts, ignoring her. His eyes, she hopes, paying attention to the traffic on Frankstown. Not heavy like in Frankstown's heyday, but picking up at the hour the school bus stops, not quite at the corner. Still, enough cars to worry about, since it only takes one, and there's always one, it seems, ready and willing to do a terrible thing. Engine gunned, the horn, the roar, brakes squealing, and sometimes glass shattering, metal crunched, and the twisted, metal crunched and twisted, the soft giving sound of flesh lost in shattering explosions. She hears them daily, gunshots, reports of dying, hears cars rushing through the night, driven by angry men, by boys not much older than the one whose hand she takes in her mind when he'll let her take it, and crosses him on green, steps him up on the far curb, turns him left, past the fools and lost souls and nothing better to do's loafing outside Mason's bar, then crosses him through the vacant lot alongside Mason's where they killed a boy, the boy whose shape, in spite of the darkness, she could almost make out from her balcony. Lying in the thick weeds, the city came and cut a few days after the boy shot down, after a night cops stalked in pairs through the jungle where pitiful souls squat to do their business after dark, where they sleep and eat and fight and curse. Mostly men back there, but some sorry women too. Cops flashing flashlights and big spotlights from humming trucks parked on the sidewalk. She watched two of them, plainclothes detectives, walking zigzag like they know better than to do where they find themselves, not in any hurry to reach the lot's far end, the alley blacker than the lot that cuts behind row houses and apartment buildings, black too at that time of night. One cop in a long dark leather jacket, the other a bulky trench coat, collar turned up. The cops took their good time, even with other cops everywhere and their own guns out and flashlights lit, strolling zigzag to the edge of the lot, then stop and peer up and down around the corners of the buildings this side of the alley like bookends holding in the lot's emptiness, the men not taking a single step further as if the back alley's a boiling river. She crosses the boy in daylight on a path tamped down in weeds grown thick again since they were clipped by fellows who came in a truck, one riding a loud mower, unchained and ramped down from the truck's flatbed, two with rakes and old-timey sickles, chopping weeds, taking away with them, when the truck rolled off, she prayed, the dead boy's shape that had been pressed into the weeds. So maybe it's better now, safer now. She squeezes the boy's hand before she lets go, and he bends to get the key from a box or coffee can or flower pot beside the two steps into his house, front steps or back alley steps. She doesn't know what to call them, watching while he unlocks the door, opens it, steps inside, and her deep exhale could be the door wheezing shut safely behind him. Is that how you dream the streets, Mom? How you dreamed me? Dream lives for the people you observe each day from your 6th floor perch, here where your God has assigned you, or some might say deserted you, no mercy for your bad back or your crippled legs or your astronomical blood pressure or gout or the cancer burrowing into your colon until it decides you had misery enough already, so crawled off to murder a healthier host. No pity on your hyperactive sinuses or the burn, stiffness, pinch, and sleep-stealing scourge of arthritis. The same God you'd be quick to remind me, shushing me, scolding me with your eyes, the God who, you'd say, wrapped his hand around yours and guided you to this station, led you here to spend the last days of your life in exactly the spot you would have chosen for yourself, you'd say, for your last days, if you could have figured it out. But of course, you couldn't have figured it out, not without his mercy and guidance. No, you weren't prepared for any of this, neither the good nor the awful things, nor could you have guessed in any way, shape, or form what life would require of you, except you depended on his sweet, everlasting love, you'd say, wouldn't you? And that was preparation enough understanding, enough peace, more than you or any pilgrim had any right to expect. You'd answer something like that, no matter what I asked, wouldn't you, Mom? I understand faith is an answer to any question I can pose. The unshakable faith I've learned to admire, even envy. In you, nothing that happens in the world or spirit raises real doubts. You could be beaten up, beaten down, extinguished, and still not lose your trust in a plan, a purpose, no matter how long, how much you must suffer, and receive not the slightest explanation of why. I'm not suggesting that you can be hurt without being hurt, just the opposite. And far from being meek or complacent or resigned, you fight. You don't deny hurt. You're not impervious to suffering. You resist the suffering you and others are forced to endure. The suffering and mayhem I find incomprehensible, except as a sign of chaos, of no God, or of abandonment, even though I've known better for a good long while than to assume we were meant to be cared for or loved here in the first place. I'm proud of your way of fighting fire with fire, your hot anger like the blazes set to save a vast blazing forest. I steal that fire. Try to imagine faith's presence in you. Wonder if you try to imagine its absence in me. Is that how stories begin? Why they turn to ashes.
We do this.
Marvelous. Now it's time for questions, comments. Let's thank Rita Dove, John Wideman. Good, and Audrey has a microphone. I have a question. Rita Dove, how come you didn't go to the White House recently?
I cannot go to this White House and be used, as happens in Washington, as a front for a kind of a quiet endorsement. I've lived inside the Beltway when I was poet laureate. I know how things work there. I know that it is very difficult to get the ear of the press unless you are in those kind of situations. Once you're in there, it's very hard to control it. Because of that, when I got my invitation, and I've had other invitations, I said, no way. Even though I think that the idea of doing a literary festival is a good cause per se, and to do a poetry celebration of the voices of America is a good thing per se, I also understood the quiet endorsement that would give, and I couldn't do it. That's all.
John Wideman, why didn't you go to the White House?
I was invited, strangely enough. I got on the wrong list somehow, and I just didn't go. there are so few things that we're not complicit in, that we can't help being complicit in if we take a deep breath or go to work or buy a pair of shoes. That was one I could say no to, and so I did.
Okay. The floor is open. Questions, comments? Questions, not comments. Don't be shy. Audrey? In the back. Who, Rita? The role of poetry in politics.
The role of poetry in politics, I think the role of the poet is to see very clearly and to give it back to the world in as clear and as eloquent a fashion as you can. It is the heart. I think a poet is really, it's kind of the soul of a world, of a society, of a human being. To do that, you must be completely and absolutely honest with yourself. It also means to look at the world very clearly. In that sense, politics enters in always. To swerve, to write something for a cause, to write it for that moment, to write something knowing how it's going to turn out, usually ends up giving you bad poetry. But to write it as you have to write it, and to see where it leads you, can hopefully lead to good poetry, and hopefully also be, I think, a dangerous, because it's precise, a dangerous description of the world today, and that is very political. It's no accident that the first thing any government a totalitarian government tries to do is to stop the presses and stop the radio stations. It's no accident that they try to stop the voice.
Yes, sir, in the back. Yeah, stand up.
Yes, John Wideman, I really liked your essay, Harbors, about a year ago.
Thank you.
And Rita Dove, I grew up in Ohio too. Go Browns. And sometimes I feel here on the coast that we neglect we slight the poetry of sort of the heartland. And like for example, I think we neglect Ohio's great narrative in the 19th century of emancipation and freedom. So I'd like to ask you, what is the role of Ohio in
Well, Ohio's where it all happens, of course. I mean, hey, look at all those writers that came out of Ohio, all those presidents now. Where good water there. It's in the water. No, it's not just Ohio. It's also, and I do think there is a certain arrogance of the seaboard. You all know it, and. All of these voices, all of this pressure, are behind you, practically pushing you into the Atlantic. It's the role of Ohio, I think, is the role of any state that struggles to. I don't want to sound like a statesperson here, but it's the role of any kind of territory. Ohio is particularly interesting because it's a strange state, and it's not West and it's not East. And we always thought of ourselves as the Midwest, and Iowa said no, we weren't. And we'd say we were the East, and Pennsylvania would say, no, you aren't. But isn't it the nature of this country that we don't quite know who we are? I mean, I think it's just one more symbol of that we just haven't figured out how to define ourselves, and maybe we should stop trying in that sense. That's enough.
More questions? A couple more questions? Yes, please. Would you mind standing up so I can hear you in the back there?
For Professor Wideman, I wanted to ask you about, you talk about rhythm in your work, the rhythm of the piece, the second piece you read. If in particular, it's expression in our mind, but if that doesn't have anything to say, rhythm in other pieces, and how you formulate perhaps the meters and rhythms of your sentences, or what thoughts you may have while you're writing them, or how they may support meaning in your piece.
Well, I wish I could do justice to that question. And I probably could by writing something. But we all know that it's easy to Monday morning quarterback when you write. You can tell everybody exactly why you did A, B, and C. But you don't exactly know when you do it. Let's just say that I listened very carefully to the people who were around me when I was growing up. And those people were extraordinary storytellers. They had a sense of a dialogic sense. They had a sense of speed, a way to move stories from one place, one person to another. They had a sense of counterpoint. There was a whole collective call and response business going on. So the very nature of the kind of storytelling and the oral environment that I grew up in imprinted on me the same way my father's walk imprinted on me. And I'm sure I didn't think about wanting to walk like my father, but everybody told me I did when I was just a little baby, probably. So there you are. It's culture, and then it's study and work. I think of those sheets of paper that I was holding up and reading from. I think of them as a score. And I think that I have, because I wrote them, I have a very precise sense of how they can be performed, but they should be able to be performed many different ways. Just because I compose them, that doesn't mean there's one way that they can be performed. And so that's what I think. It's a score. And I give it to you, and you play it.
Okay. You hear whammo, that's what you hear. Questions? Yes, please, stand up.
A question for Rita in terms of music. Since you've taken ballroom dancing, tango, and so forth, has the new kind of acquired music changed or influenced or perhaps adorned the music, the cadence of your childhood in writing poetry?
It's an interesting question whether the ballroom dancing has influenced the cadences. First of all, I just wanted to say that one of the things I love John's work, and one of the things I love about it is the rhythms and the music, and he writes like a poet. He is a poet. And it's probably too early for me to tell myself how they're influencing the rhythms. I proceed, I think, when I write poetry, I proceed by sound and silence. Not necessarily rhythm too, but sound and silence at its most elemental. And so I know that it's influencing it. I just don't know how yet. It's not only the influences of the ballroom dancing. I grew up playing the cello, so there was classical music at the same time that Bessie Smith was playing at home, and there was also these wonderful storytellers like John also talked about, who knew how to move a story along. And there's also German, which has influenced my rhythms too. Interest in pushing verbs to the end of sentences. I know that has happened. I tend to be a chameleon. My husband often, when we go somewhere, I'll pick up a language really quickly. I'll lose it quickly too. I mean, I'll go somewhere and I'll pick up stuff and then I lose it again. And he's always nudging me saying, "You're imitating that person's cadence." And I said, I didn't mean to, but put me around a Swiss person and I'm, doing that thing. So it's there. I don't know how. I think that the sentences are longer. I think the lines are longer. Things are moving along because of dances, but I'll go where it takes me.
I just want to add one thing. It's really almost by way of apology. As soon as Rita opened her mouth and started to talk, I remembered the poems that she read and how much I enjoyed them, and how so clearly, particularly when you began the first one, I heard Gwendolyn Brooks, the rhythms of Gwendolyn Brooks, and every now and again it was so, the connection was so crystal clear. And I really enjoyed that, and while I'm listening to you, her poems were still there, and that kind of wonderful thing. So what I neglected to say was my fellow sufferers, listening and reading other writers goes along. That written culture, obviously, as important as the oral.
A couple more questions? Yes.
I was wondering about your process of your longer-term things, Rita Dove, that you've been working on, how you came to do them, and then how you sustain working on those over a long time period.
I love sustaining things over a long time period. I love juggling several projects at once. It's sort of like I'll tap here and then the echo comes up over there, and they feed each other. So, though I think it could drive other people crazy, I'll keep projects going 5-10 years. Even the soldier poems are about 10 years old. They just haven't found a home yet. That kind of thing. It's also because if I'm doing a long project, like for instance with the soldier poems, the research actually gets in the way of the creativity. I mean, you research and you find all this wonderful stuff, and then I'd rather just keep reading. And then I think, well, why am I trying to do this anyway? And why is this moving me? So then I have to put it away again until the voices themselves begin to speak to me, until I hear a soldier's voice telling his story. So that takes a long time. And I tend to write more than one poem at once. It's kind of weird, but I'll work on, I have folders, and I'll work on one poem and I'll stop in the middle of a sentence sometimes and go on to something else. It's because if I hear myself talk when I'm writing the poem, then I know I've gotten too big for my britches and it's time to put it away until it finds its own voice again. Because there's a danger of just writing like yourself. You hear yourself, so it's hard to...
Final question? Yes.
If dancing or performing music or speaking urban influences the writing of poetry, does playing basketball influence the writing of poetry?
Well, it keeps you away from writing for huge swatches of time, which is probably good for my craft and the medium, and that's true. To have a divided soul like that, or a divided love, means that I'm very happy when I have a chance to get to either, and they sort of compete and they sort of make a tension. But yes, the oral culture, for one thing, is very, very important in the basketball world. And that's even before the trash talking, much before trash talking. Trash talking is a particular form of that, and an interesting form. But anytime you went to an urban court, the courts that I grew up on, you had an amazing counterpoint of the ball, the sound of the feet on the court, the people who were sitting on the side, kibitzing and signifying, the talk between the people on the side and the players, the talk among players. And then, hey, when the game's over, you got to get some liquid inside of you. So, that led directly into lemonade and beverages like that, and the talk coming to the court, leaving the court. But the court itself, you can imagine somebody without any trouble, a player like Michael Jordan, and he's just the most obvious, who is a sort of a master drummer. And all the other players pick up the beat, pick up the rhythms, and join him and become part of that master narrative that he sets up. That's why it's great to play with the best players, with the players who can carry the game to a place you'll never get to, but you can accompany and you can watch. So yes, it's the court has its peculiar music.
Well, we as the audience have been able to accompany and watch Rita Dove, John Wideman. Thank you. Thank you.